Nunez heads media startup and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. Welcome, everyone, to this podcast. It is called Nunez Heads Media Startup, and we do have a dumbest bill in America, and it is from New York State and New York City, once again. First up, podcast listeners, in the Daily Caller, California Congressman Devin Nunes announces his retirement, and he plans to join Trump's new media outlet. Republican California Representative Devin Nunes announced Monday that he will retire from Congress at the end of this year to join a media venture founded by former President Donald Trump. Quote, "Recently, I was presented with a new opportunity to fight for the most important issues I believe in," Nunes wrote in a letter to his constituents. "I'm writing to let you know I've decided to pursue this opportunity, and therefore I will be leaving the House of Representatives at the end of 2021. He will become the chief executive officer of the Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG. The organization announced in a press release. Quote, "Congressman Devin Nunes is a fighter and a leader. He will make an excellent CEO of TMTG. Devin understands that we must stop the liberal media and big tech from destroying the freedoms that make America great. America is ready for the truth social," I guess they're calling it truth social, "and the end to censorship and political discrimination," Trump said. And Ryan Nobles tweeted out that not only is Devin Nunes leaving Congress and he's going to head this new media group, but that he's not going to serve out the rest of his term, which would be through the end of 2022. Instead, he's leaving the end of 2021, just at the end of this month. And he's going to head up this media startup. First elected to Congress in 2002, Devin Nunes was the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee from 2015 to 2019, and is currently the second-ranking Republican on the House Ways and Means Committee. Nunes is the 32nd member and 13th Republican to decline to run for re-election this election cycle. Nunes' current district, California's 22nd, is expected to be redrawn to much less friendly to Republicans. A map released in November by the state's Citizen Redistricting Commission would make the 22nd district 14 points more Democrat if enacted. So they're turning it to a Dem seat. California is also losing a seat due to low population growth for the first time in its history. A longtime Trump ally, Nunes was one of the highest profile critics of Robert Mueller's investigation into alleged criminal collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia during the 2016 presidential election cycle. I'm sure you guys remember that. Nunes was constantly on TV and ran his actual committee, the Intelligence Committee, to be able to constantly look into what had actually happened. And he was saying that it was a hoax years ago. So he's one of the good guys. He frequently tangled with Democrats on the Intelligence Committee, most notably fellow Californians Adam Schiff and Eric Swallowswell. A memo produced by staffers for Nunes found that the since debunked Steele dossier played a major role in the FBI's decision to seek a FISA warrant against Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. Nunes' retirement will trigger a special election, which is, kind of funny, right? Because you'll have a special election, that individual will serve maybe, if they're lucky, 8 or 9 months by the time the special election is over. And then you're going to have, of course, redistricting. And the so-called independent commission in California is head over heels trying to get rid of this good guy anyway, so it's just great timing for Nunes. It's very fortunate that he has this other opportunity. And in the comments section of this Daily Caller article, it's just unanimous. People are saying it's sad to see this great patriot leave the House, a body that he served with distinction. Another one, I've always considered Nunes to be one of the good guys, so I hate to see him leave the House. Another one, too bad, as hopeless as California has become, he is one of the good guys and among the few fighters left in the state of California. That's how all these comments went. I mean, just people one after another saying, isn't it really sad that this one good guy, this one really smart guy, and here's the thing too, Nunes is a really smart guy because he was able to get to the truth in the Russia collusion hoax very early on. I mean, he just called it from the very beginning, and the mainstream media didn't cover it. They continued down the path of there being Russia collusion and that Trump was a Russian asset. I mean, again and again and again. And that Trump's administration was controlled by the Russian, the Russian government. Just, he's a Vladimir Putin spy. Just ridiculous. And here is what's great about this podcast, listeners. Devin Nunes is now going to be ahead of a new media startup. So no longer will he have to worry about 99.9% of the media not covering the truth. Now, with this new media startup, Nunes can actually expand free thinking, diversity of thought, and also he can expand the fact that there is a need for the truth in the media. As opposed to CNN, which of course, CNN Plus, the plus is for pedophiles, CNN Plus, which of course has hired who? Chris Wallace. And then also, it just came out, which is why we're calling it CNN Plus pedophiles. A CNN producer accused of child sex crimes once decried growing news stories of child abuse cases in old tweet. So in Fox News, the CNN producer accused of shocking sex crimes against minors once decried the growing number of news stories about child abuse. In other words, he was really distraught about all of the cases of child abuse. Right. John Griffin was charged by a grand jury in Vermont with 3 counts of using a facility of interstate commerce to attempt to entice minors to engage in unlawful sexual activity. Griffin is currently in custody and his arraignment is scheduled on Wednesday at 11 a.m., which is tomorrow. Griffin, a senior producer for CNN's long-struggling morning program, New Day, yeah, that's quite a new day for him, was taken into custody following a federal indictment accusing him of coercing parents to allow their minor daughters to engage in sexual activity in his home. Well, you know what? To the extent that any parent did this willingly and knowingly, the parent should go to jail. However, as well as Griffin, by the way. However, Griffin was once vocally disheartened by the growing instances of crimes against children that were being committed. Just did the math. Quote, we have, count them, 4 stories about people abusing kids today, 3 up now. If we're society's mirror, you people suck, Griffin tweeted in 2010. In other words, he's virtue signaling in a tweet about how distraught he is that so much child abuse is occurring today. And meanwhile, this guy is engaging in child abuse via being a sexual predator. The indictment, which was sealed when the arrest was first reported, provides lewd particulars of crimes allegedly committed by this CNN senior producer. The indictment includes various messages Griffin sent via Kik, Google Hangouts, and texts. Griffin stated he believes there is a wanton... What? He believes there is a wanton whore at the core of any female. I read that correctly. Wow. Griffin, the guy that's charged from CNN, this producer, stated he believes there is a wanton whore at the core of any female and that a woman is a woman regardless of her age, according to messages included in the indictment. And he sent these messages to the mothers and daughters who had daughters that were ages 9 and 13. And he says in another text, one of the big lies of this society is that women are delicate, innocent angels and that they are in actuality naturally the dirtiest sluts possible in every metric. What? I mean, this is CNN, guys. This is a producer at CNN. And you wonder why Devin Nunes is so badly needed to head up a new media outlet. And it's Trump's media outlet, of course, that is heading up, but you wonder why. And here's another example. Do you remember Jeffrey Toobin at CNN? Remember he was the guy that was exposing himself and pleasuring himself on Zoom while on a CNN call. So Jeffrey Toobin returned to CNN, and this was back in June of this year. That's when he returned to CNN. This tells you what CNN thinks about sexual predators. Jeffrey Toobin returned to CNN as the network's chief legal analyst on Thursday, 8 months after he exposed himself during a Zoom call with colleagues at The New Yorker. So let me get this straight. You have a CNN producer who was arrested because he's a sexual predator, clearly, and a pedophile. You have another CNN, I guess, what would you call him? I guess he's a contributor. He's their chief legal analyst. Okay, Jeffrey Zubin. You have another one, Jeffrey Zubin, who wasn't arrested, probably, should have been. In a normal world, he probably would have been because, indecent exposure is indecent exposure, whether you do it on Zoom or whether you do it in public. It's the same thing because these individuals certainly didn't ask to see Jeffrey Zubin or Zoomin Toobin as he became known. Well, they hired him back. So they have a sexual predator at CNN who is arrested. They have another guy, Jeffrey Toobin, who's a sexual predator and a pervert, obviously. And then they have, of course, Chris Cuomo. Chris Cuomo, whom they just let go. And you know that Jeff Zucker at CNN knew all along that these individuals were messed up. You knew it. He had to have known. He's the producer. He knows that these people have issues and that they're not in the right state of mind, needless to say, to be working at CNN. Yet he kept them. And then there's MSNBC, Clara McCaskill, who's the former United States Senator from Missouri. She claims red states will empower citizens to round up people who look foreign. So MSNBC analyst Clara McCaskill claimed Monday that Republican-controlled states would soon implement vigilantism and vigilantism laws to combat immigration that would empower citizens to round up people who look like foreigners. This is MSNBC. This is their idea of journalism at MSNBC. And of course, you already heard the idea of journalism at CNN, right? It's CNN Plus, it's CNN Plus the Predators. And then MSNBC, it's how dumb can you be to be on MSNBC? Well, we have this clip from Missouri U.S. Senator. She's the former U.S. Senator from Missouri, that is, Clara McCaskill. Unbelievable that this woman could ever be a United States Senator. Nonetheless, MSNBC has her on because she's an analyst for MSNBC. We have that clip, and here it is.
And I think this vigilantism is going to catch on. I'll tell you what's going to happen next, Nicole. These red states are going to do vigilantism laws on immigration, and they're going to empower citizens to go out and round up people they think look like foreigners. And that's what we're coming to in this country, and it is incredibly depressing, especially as we're so near a religious holiday that is all about loving other people and accepting the least among us to be part of the larger group.
I mean, as you're both speaking, it's clear that we need to bump this up, and this is a 4-alarm fire. We should cover it as such. This program has been simulcast on the Cooking Channel due to Claire's cake behind her.
Yeah, so that's Nicole Wallace at the end. She's the anchor there at MSNBC, one of the anchors, and incredibly stupid. You can't get dumber than Nicole Wallace. And even when she talks, she can't even articulate. It's like, yeah. And then she talks about how, since there were cakes in the background when they were having this conversation on MSNBC with Clara McCaskill, that, it should be simulcast, or it was being simulcast. And that was supposed to be funny. But meanwhile, these two women, and there's a third woman that they had also talked to that was also shown on this clip, if you can't see it, but they all look so angry. They're just like angry. They just look like the last person you would ever want to spend time with. I mean, just unhappy with their lives, unhappy with everything. And then you have Clara McCaskill, who is projecting, saying, well, all of the people in the red states are going to round up all these illegal immigrants and they're just going to arrest them. And so nothing like this has happened, yet this is what they're talking about. And they're saying, well, it's Christmas time, so it's those Republicans that just don't know how to be charitable. It's like, first of all, it's not happening. Okay. And secondly, you're projecting, because when you let millions of people come to the United States, we don't know who they are, and they could be murderers, rapists, drug dealers. How many people have died so far in the United States as a result of the fentanyl overdoses, as a result of the people coming across the border? I mean, they don't care about that. They don't care. And so why are we talking about CNN and why are we talking about MSNBC? Because of the fact that we wanted to remind you about how bad they are and how they really aren't networks, news networks. They're just pretending to be news networks, and all they are is, of course, the another arm of the Democrat Party and another arm of progressivism and Marxism. And they lie to you every day. And thank goodness you have Devin Nunes joining this media startup. Now, I don't know how it's going to turn out, this media startup, but you also have Rumble that's building these very large facilities and offices in the west coast of Florida. I think they're going to be in Sarasota, Florida. It's pretty interesting. So you have a lot of new media starting up. They're way behind, by the way, from big tech. I mean, they're way behind YouTube, obviously. They're way behind Facebook in terms of their development and number of people who have engaged with them. But when they are actually up and running finally, maybe we're going to see a pretty large decrease in activity on Facebook. Wouldn't that be great? Maybe Facebook's usage, at least in the US, will drop by 100 million people. Maybe YouTube's usage in the US will drop by 100 million people. That'll send a message. And that's exactly what needs to happen, because then they're going to have to compete in the real world with viewers, because it's all about viewership. You can't see an ad unless you have a viewer that's, watching, obviously. That's how they're making money. And they can't afford to lose 100 million people. And I'm serious. That's probably what they're going to end up losing. And I'm thrilled that Devin Nunes, who's a really smart guy, is going to be heading up this media empire, because I don't think he has any desire to provide a news outlet that is going to lie. Will it be right-leaning? Of course it will be, I'm sure. But are they going to just sit there and lie like you just heard MSNBC do? Or are they going to continue to employ predators, child predators like CNN, and complete perverts like Zoom and Tubin? I don't think they're going to put up with it. Because I have to admit, one thing about, Trump and his businesses, he doesn't put up with that kind of stuff. I mean, you have way too much to lose by maintaining these people. And that's what I just can't understand, why CNN wouldn't have fired these people a long time ago. But it shows you that you got Chris Wallace going to CNN now. Why? Why would Chris Wallace go there? I know what you're saying as well, because he's a lefty. Okay, that's got to be the only reason. Because I can't think of a worse time to go to CNN. What is the worst time to go to CNN when you got all these people? They're being arrested. They're being fired. So it's going to be interesting. So next up, podcast listeners, we have a segment on topless equity. Yes, you heard that correctly. Topless equity. In the Hill newspaper, women call on the United States Supreme Court to strike down a town's topless sunbathing ban. So, a group of women are calling on the Supreme Court to strike down a Maryland town's topless sunbathing ban, contending that the policy is discriminatory towards women. Attorneys representing 5 women in a case involving Ocean City, Maryland statute filed a petition with the Supreme Court on December 1st, calling on the bench to review a lower court's decision that called the local policy constitutional, the Salisbury Daily Times reported on Monday. The Supreme Court has until January 7th to respond to the petition. Ocean City passed an ordinance in 2017 after Chelsea Eileen, one of the plaintiffs behind the petition, reached out to local police to argue for her ability to be topless on the beach, according to the Daily Times. So Chelsea went to the police and said, you're telling me to put my top on. That's ridiculous. I should be able to go topless. The next year, Eileen and 4 other women reportedly sued Ocean City, contending that the local law breaches the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. So apparently, according to these women, 5 women to be exact, the United States Constitution, the Equal Protection Clause, also includes being topless on a public beach. And I guess what they're saying is if men can be topless, women can be. But here's the thing. Not all women are equal when they're topless. So, that's an issue too. So you have an equal protection clause. I'm not really sure. I think what they mean is equity, don't they? So maybe what they should do instead is go to Fantasy Fest in Key West, where there's a period of time that's running right up to Halloween every year during Fantasy Fest where it's like clothing optional. And I think, let's face it, 80% of the people are wearing clothes, but you do have that 20% that probably should be wearing clothes, but for whatever reason choose not to. And most of them are women who are topless. So they can go there. In April 2020, a federal judge ruled that the law was legal and not unconstitutional, a decision that the plaintiffs appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals less than a month later, according to the newspaper. A 3-judge panel, however, upheld the local law in August, according to Associated Press. The unanimous ruling said that courts throughout the U.S. have bolstered similar policies. Judge A. Marvin Quattlebaum Jr., that's quite a name, Quattlebaum. Judge A. Marvin Quattlebaum Jr. said the town's leadership had the right to enforce the local policy for women, but not men, to safeguard public sensibilities, according to the AP. Chief Judge Roger Gregory concurred with the ruling, writing that precedent from the Supreme Court bolsters the policy, but he did suggest that the bench should take another look at the matter. I thought that was funny. Another look. Okay. Quote, at first glance, Ocean City's ordinance seems innocuous enough, but we must take care not to let our analysis be confined to the limits of our social lens, Gregory wrote, according to the AP. Suppose the ordinance defined nudity to include public exposure of a woman's hair, neck, shoulders, or ankles. Would that law not run afoul of the Equal Protection Clause, he added? The petition is specifically asking the Supreme Court to determine if protecting traditional moral sensibilities is so high of an interest for the government that it warrants discriminating against women, according to the AP. Oh, give me a break. It asks the justices to rule the policy is in breach of the Equal Protection Clause because the discriminatory gender classification contained in the ordinance does not further an important governmental interest. Well, okay. And is not narrowly tailored to achieve its objective, according to the Newswire. So what you just heard is you have 5 women who have decided to take their case to the United States Supreme Court because they are not permitted to be topless in what is a family beach town. If you're familiar with Ocean City, Maryland, it's like so many beach towns across America where it is geared towards, and always has been, and marketed to families. In other words, moms and dads with children. And those moms and dads with children are all over the beach. I mean, it's one of those beaches where in the peak summertime period, you can barely find a place to put your towel to lay down. That's how crowded it is. And these women are like, well, I can go topless, because that's just the way it should be. And the thing is there are children there and there are community standards. And the community standards in Ocean City, Maryland are such that it's a family place. And if you want to do that, you should go to Fantasy Fest and do it there. But that's why we're calling this topless equity, because these women are like, well, I mean, it's a constitutional right to go, topless. And then, of course, the next thing will be a constitutional right to go naked. Next thing you know, you have transgenders who are like, well, it's a constitutional right to show everybody what I look like. It's not going to end well. These things never do. And the thing is every community has their own standards. If you want to go to a place where you want to be free, clothing free, that would probably be, Key West, just saying. And you'll probably be not bothered at all by the police. That's my kind of guess there. So that's topless equity. Next up, podcast listeners, we have Go Woke or Go Broke. Get this. A San Francisco restaurant kicked out police from the restaurant and said, while they may have handled it badly, they're not going to rule out doing it again. Can you imagine? The owners of a San Francisco restaurant are now apologizing after denying service to 3 uniformed police officers who were on duty. Hilda and Jesse initially denied service to the 3 San Francisco Police Department officers on Friday after they were seated at the restaurant. According to ABC7 News, one of the owners said that the on-duty police officer's presence made staff at the restaurant feel uncomfortable. It's not about the fact that we are anti-police. Yeah, sure. Co-owner of Hilda and Jesse, Rachel Silcox, said, it is about the fact that we do not allow weapons in our restaurant. We were uncomfortable and we asked them to leave. It has nothing to do with the fact that they were police officers. It has everything to do with the fact that they were carrying guns. How dare they? Here's my solution. Next time these 2 individuals, next time this restaurant needs help because they're being robbed, because they have break-ins and so forth, the officers can say, sorry, we can't serve you. We can't serve you because remember, we have those bad guns. We can't serve you anymore. We can't go in there because we have guns. Sorry, we can't write up any reports for you. According to Silcox, the owner of the place, the officers are welcome to come back and dine in the restaurant, but without their weapons. In a new Instagram post on Sunday afternoon, the co-owners apologized for asking the on-duty officers to leave. We made a mistake and apologize for the unfortunate incident on Friday when we asked members of the San Francisco Police Department to leave our restaurant, co-owners Rachel Silcox and Christina Ledags Compton said. Lots of names there. We are grateful to all the members of the force who work hard to keep us safe, especially during these challenging times. The co-owners continued, stating that they hope the incident will be a teachable moment, but stopped short of saying whether on-duty officers are welcome in the establishment. The online restaurant review platform Yelp announced they are temporarily suspending the ability for individuals to make reviews for the Hilda and Jesse restaurant because of increased public attention. You got to love that, right? That's what Yelp is for. You get to say what you want to say about the restaurant, about the food, about the service, about the stupidity of not allowing first responders to eat in your restaurant. Quote, this business recently received increased public attention, which often means people come to this page to post their views on the news. While we don't take a stand one way or the other when it comes to this incident, we've temporarily disabled the posting of content to this page as we work to investigate the content you see here reflects actual consumer experiences rather than the recent events, the announcement reads. After the incident on Friday, the business received a number of one-star reviews bashing the restaurant for asking the on-duty police officers to leave. Why give them 1 star? Why not give them a half a star? Given that this business has decided to discriminate against first responders, I reserve the right to call for a boycott of Hilda and Jesse restaurant, one Yelp user wrote. The San Francisco Police Department Chief William Scott said in a Twitter post on Saturday that he found the incident discouraging and personally disappointing. The San Francisco Police Department stands for safety with respect, even when it means respecting the wishes that our officers and I find discouraging and personally disappointing, Scott said on Twitter. I believe the vast majority of San Franciscans welcome their police officers who deserve to know that they are appreciated for the difficult job we ask them to do in their uniforms to keep our neighborhoods and businesses safe. A spokesperson for Yelp told Fox Business that the company takes a very proactive approach when dealing with review bombing. Oh, wow. Can you believe that? It's called review bombing. I didn't even know that that was a thing. Quote, for years, Yelp has taken a very proactive approach to dealing with review bombing incidents through our Consumer Alerts program. We place unusual activity alerts on a Yelp page when we uncover an influx of activity in response to a business gaining public attention, caused by people coming to Yelp to express their views on an issue instead of describing their actual interaction with a business. Isn't that what the restaurant owners just did? It's our policy that all reviews on Yelp must be based on a first-hand consumer experience with the business. After this activity, the page, here we go. After this activity has dramatically decreased or stopped, our moderators will remove the alert and clean up the page so only first-hand consumer experiences are reflected. Factoring this type of content out of the equation protects the interests of both consumers and business owners, the spokesperson for Yelp said. In other words, if you're the owners of the restaurant, you can deny service to the first responders. And no one has the right then after that to go on Yelp and say, yeah, I witnessed it. I find that disgusting. Or how awful is that? I will never go there. So Yelp is backing up the owners of the restaurants, which is stupid, of course. Yelp should just stay out of it because I actually thought that that's what the platforms were supposed to do. They were supposed to be available to you, and then you could decide whether or not you wanted to participate or not participate. And then everything that you put up would be left there. And if you wanted to take it down, it would be up to you to take it down because you have that option to delete or edit what you've said. But that's not the way these big tech platforms work. They circle the woke. They circle the woke, which is why this is our Go Woke or Go Broke segment, this podcast. And more importantly than that is the fact that our first responders are needed now more than ever because 12 major Democrat cities have broken their homicide records after an historically bloody 2020. So we're finally getting what happened in 2020 and through 2021, and we're now seeing that the 12 major cities across the nation broke annual homicide records this year following 2020's already historically bloody year. So in other words, this year is worse than last year. And last year was really bad. The community has to get fed up, Rochester Police Department Captain Frank said at a news conference in November. We are extremely frustrated. It has to stop. I mean, it's worse than a war zone around here lately. Rochester broke its 30-year-old homicide record on November 11th with 71 homicides. The city's previous record sat at 69 in 1991. Can you imagine? 30 years ago. Rochester is joined by 11 other cities that broke homicide records this year, according to ABC News, including Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Toledo, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Austin, Texas, Louisville, Kentucky, St. Paul, Minnesota, Portland, Oregon, Tucson, Arizona, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. All 12 cities are led by Democrat mayors. Yeah. Any surprise there? But meanwhile, these idiots want to cancel the police, and you have the San Francisco restaurant that won't even serve them food in the restaurant. Knowing how bad things are in these blue cities, the Democrat mayors are under fire for all of the violence that's plaguing their cities. And what do you think they're doing? They're blaming the retailers and the business people for the smash and grab robberies. So Democrat mayors are raising eyebrows with their responses to the rising crime plaguing major cities like New York City, Chicago, and Philadelphia. The U.S. murder rate rose 30% between 2019 and 2020, according to FBI data. The largest annual increase on record, with Chicago topping the list. At least 12 major cities, including New York, have already set historical murder records in 2021. Robberies and assaults are also on the rise, and retailers in major cities across the country are reporting an uptick in organized crime, smash and grab crimes during the busy holiday shopping season. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot faced criticism last week after she responded to the recent flood of robberies in her city by blaming retailers for not better protecting their merchandise. So I guess that's the thing now, right? You're a retailer, you need to protect your merchandise better. So how exactly would you protect it better if you're a retailer? You need people to see what you're selling. So you have the windows like, you would normally have with displays in the windows in major cities. So people see that, they're enticed, and they walk in. But the smash and grabbers break the windows. Once the window is broken, they go in en masse and they steal everything. So what would you do differently if you're a retailer? Are you supposed to board up the windows? Then how are people going to see and be enticed to come into your store? Are you supposed to just sit there in a chair and wait for them to break the windows, and then once they step in the store, shoot them? I mean, maybe that's what has to happen. But you know as well as I do that Lori Lightfoot and de Blasio would never allow that to happen. But yet they're blaming the retailers. That's exactly like saying to the average American out there that, well, the reason you have so many people breaking into your house and you have home invasions is because you're not doing a good enough job protecting your house. And you're like, well, I mean, I guess I could get my gun out of the safe and just sit there all night and, shoot the same guy that keeps coming in like once a week, and that'll kind of take care of that. And quite frankly, maybe that's what has to happen, because the mayors of these big blue cities are doing nothing to protect you. And then, meanwhile, in San Francisco, you've got these idiot left-wing woke restaurant owners who are telling the police officers, we can't serve you coffee, we can't serve you food because you've got guns. You've got guns. And then you got the blue city mayor saying, well, you need to do a better job to protect yourself. So which is it? Do I get to have guns and protect myself? Or do I just, sit down and take it? And what's happening is more and more Americans are waking up, and really what they're doing is they're moving. Sadly, they're moving. And I say sadly because you do get to a point where you just don't want to fight anymore. You just want to move to a place where you have people of like mind and representatives who are willing to do the right thing because they also have like mind. But increasingly in these major cities, you have people that are just leaving. And who's left? Who's left? Well, you got all the liberals and all the progressives and the Marxists who are now going to have to live by the policies that they have voted in. So stupid. It's just so incredibly stupid. And I don't understand why there isn't a teaching moment here. Like, maybe the reason why crime has gone up is because we're soft on crime. There's never a teaching moment with the left. It's just fascinating. So next up, podcast listeners, Randi Weingarten. She's the head of the National Teachers Union, if you're wondering. She says, pass the salt. That's state and local tax deductions, SALT. That's what that stands for. Pass the salt. So the Teachers Union chief, Randi Weingarten, wants to give millionaires a tax break. Now remember, Randy Weingarten is the head of the teachers union. What does giving a tax break to the wealthy have to do with being a head of the teachers union? Right? Isn't the function of the teachers union to focus like a laser on education? Oh no, not anymore. So this is in the Wall Street Journal. It's by the editorial board. With battles over school closures, vaccine mandates, and curricula, you might think the president of the American Federation of Teachers has enough on her plate, but Randy Weingarten is now lobbying hard for a tax break whose benefits would go mostly to the wealthy. She wants Democrats to restore the deduction for state and local taxes in their giant tax and spending bill. That's not how Ms. Weingartner is selling it. SALT, quote, is a way of delivering for the middle class, she tweeted last week. At a press conference Wednesday outside the Capitol, with a bipartisan SALT caucus, the teachers union chief repeated this theme. But in tying that deduction to progressive spending at the state and local levels, participants gave away their real reason for wanting the SALT deduction. It encourages higher state and local spending on teacher pay and teacher pensions. As New York Representative Tom Suozzi admitted, quote, we've chosen in our states to tax people to do progressive policies, which is why Ms. Weingarten was right there beside him. Representative Joyce Beatty, Democrat from Ohio, also spoke and said Congress needs to deliver SALT relief because too many of her constituents are paying high and often unfair property taxes. Think about that. She wants to restore the federal SALT tax relief because at the local level, people are paying high property taxes. Well, if you have high property taxes on your home, podcast listeners, those property taxes are levied by the state and the local governments. They're not levied by the federal government. Yet these individuals, including Randy Weingarten, wants to restore those taxes and those tax breaks, I should say, to individuals who pay really high property taxes, no matter how big their house may be, rather than saying to them, we're not going to do this anymore at the federal level. You have to go back to the state government and back to your local government and push back and tell them to do what? To stop raising taxes, to go ahead and lower property taxes. Case in point. My wife and I have very good friends who live on Long Island in New York. And in Nassau County, Long Island, they have this tiny little house. It's, 3 small bedrooms, very small bedrooms, a very, very small kitchen, very small living room. You get the picture. It's tiny. Okay. And it's on this postage stamp lot. I mean, the house is not connected to the other house, but you could easily, if you really wanted to, reach over and touch the other house if you wanted to. Their property taxes are slightly over $20,000 per year. Their property taxes. It's not sustainable, folks. This is not sustainable. And so the SALT tax deductions basically said, as passed during the Trump administration when the Republicans controlled Congress, basically said, hey, look, we're not going to give you these deductions anymore because it encourages these blue states and blue cities to constantly raise income taxes and property taxes. And that shouldn't be the responsibility of the rest of the country. There's no skin in the game for you if you get to just deduct it from your federal tax return. You need to have skin in the game. And the skin in the game is you need to go back to your local officials and tell them to do what? To lower them. And so I bring up our friends in Long Island because in Long Island is so bad, the property taxes are so bad that people actually, when they advertise a house, they actually advertise the amount of the property taxes as well. It's not just the price of the house, it's the price of the property taxes because they're so high. People don't want to live there. They're like, well, gee, I know it's a really nice house, honey, but the property taxes are $2,000 a month. There are a lot of blue cities that are like this. It's not sustainable. And so why Randy Weingarten, the head of the teachers union, is even involved in this, I don't even know. But it tells you why we must dismantle completely this centralized education monopoly that we have created in the country, because it is not serving the people that it's supposed to be serving the best, namely the children and their parents. It's all about Randy Weingarten. It's all about all the progressive policies. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Let's hear it. And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is an all-electric building act. Yes, it's called the All-Electric Building Act. It's not just in New York State, it's also in New York City. The New York State law, of course, would apply statewide. The New York City law, they're trying to pass it as well, even faster, and it looks like they're going to. And the purpose of the bill is to do what? To ban the use of natural gas on new construction and on building renovations. It's the All-Electric Building Act. So it's a ban on natural gas. Can you imagine in a city like New York, the country's largest city? That's so stupid. So here are the losers who are outside in New York City with one of the city council women. And you should see them. They're holding these signs, and a couple of them are holding, different kinds of, I guess, looks like they're in a cemetery, like headstones because of these people, this is our future if they ever get in charge. Unfortunately, they are in charge in New York City. Well, to hear them is to understand them. We have a short clip on this, and here it is.
Gas free, NYC. Gas free, NYC. Gas free,
NYC, gas free, NYC. I mean, it's like there's so much energy there. And yet this bill is going to pass in New York City, and it is probably going to pass in New York State. So Senate Bill S6843A in the state of New York, sponsored by Brian Kavanaugh, enacts the All-Electric Building Act, provides that no city, town, or village shall issue a permit for the construction of new buildings that are not an all-electric building if the initial application for a permit was submitted after December 31, 2023. So in other words, if you're going to build a new building, or if you're going to pull a building permit for construction to renovate a building in New York State, you have to use electricity only. So if you're trying to heat the building and it gets really cold in upstate New York, and it certainly gets very cold in New York City in the wintertime, you have to heat it with electricity. Imagine not just the cost, podcast listeners, imagine how stupid this is. Okay, because I know what you're thinking. Oh, well, it's not a big deal. We'll just have, the power plants just generate a lot more electricity, and then the power bills will go up more and that's the worst case thing, right? Just more expensive electricity bills. That's only part of it. Because remember, this bill works very closely with other bills that have been passed in New York State, namely mandating that you have to use solar or wind, that they have to get rid of any kind of power plant over the next 5, 10, 15, 25 years because of climate change, any power plant that uses oil, natural gas, or coal. So then you ask the question, in New York City, for example, if you have to use only electricity to heat your building and not natural gas or oil, then how will you get sufficient electricity? Where will you get sufficient electricity, since the state is also trying to ban, and will successfully eventually, any kind of natural gas power plant? Well, they're going to get it from, you got it, they're going to get it from solar and wind, which we're going to get to in a minute. We're going to talk about that in a minute because there are a couple of really funny articles about this. And it tells you the timing of these articles that New York State and New York City are trying to pass this ban on natural gas. So in Bloomberg Business, New York City poised to ban gas in new buildings, buoying electrification. Forbidding natural gas hookups in new buildings aims for a greener city. The movement to banish natural gas from U.S. homes and buildings is about to claim its biggest surprise yet: New York City. Next week, city council members are expected to vote to ban gas hookups in new buildings as a way to fight both air pollution and climate change. Gone will be gas furnaces, water heaters, and the blue flame stovetops beloved by cooks and realtors alike in the city of 8 million people. New buildings, smaller than 7 stories, must rely solely on electricity, starting at the end of 2023, while larger buildings will have an extra 4 years to comply. The move will bring fresh momentum to an effort to rid new construction of the fossil fuel, which has already seen some success along the West Coast in cities including San Francisco, where they have rolling blackouts. And while the fossil fuel industry remains bitterly opposed, casting the bans as a misguided war on gas, some climate activists and civic officials say cities aiming to slash their greenhouse gas emissions may have little choice but to follow along. Buildings account for 68% of New York City's greenhouse gas emissions, and most of that's from natural gas. Don't believe that for a minute. There's no real way to hit the city's climate goals if you're still burning fossil fuels inside buildings, said Russell Unger, who leads the building's electrification initiative at the RMI Energy think tank. The math just doesn't add up. So this article goes on and on and on about how they're going to power New York State and New York City. And then simultaneously with this article and a number of other articles coming out about this stupid bill in New York State and a mirrored bill in the city of New York about how they want to ban natural gas and you must only use electricity to heat your buildings. No other kind of oil or natural gas can be used. Well, at the same time those bills came out, you had the articles explaining them, and you have a couple of articles that have come out about solar power. So here's one. The upstate land grab behind the solar power boom. The future of American energy lies in a 30-acre field at the base of the Finger Lakes, tucked between rolling hills and 2-lane roads. It contains 23,000 solar panels, including and producing 9 million kilowatt hours of electricity each year, enough to power 840 average American homes. So think about this, folks. It's 30 acres, and those 30 acres with 23,000 solar panels is only going to power 840 average-sized American homes. So that would mean in New York State, in order for you to power the state and all of the cities in New York, including New York City, you're going to need what? You're going to need to cover every square inch of upstate New York with solar panels. In other words, no more beautiful rolling fields. No, just all you're going to see is these really ugly solar panels. Wonder what that's going to do to habitats. Wonder what that's going to do to, like all the wildlife. Wonder what that's going to do to, the farmers and the people that actually grow things. Wonder what that's going to do to the view shed. Well, they don't really care because there's an upstate land grab for solar panel farms, not because of the fact that they make sense, but because of government and government mandates. And this bill is just another one, right? Everything has to be electric. There can't be any natural gas. So then there's another article in USA Today, fact check. false claim that replacing cornfields with solar panels exacerbates climate change. And so this article goes on and says, well, it's not a threat to scenery and to livelihoods, and it's not a threat, of course, to cover millions of acres with solar panels. It's not a threat to the wildlife. It's not a threat to farmers. I mean, who are these people? How stupid are they? I mean, the idea that by covering the ground with concrete and steel and the solar panels, the silicon that covers them, and doing that, and somehow you're not impacting the land. I mean, because it's generating electricity, you also have to surround it with a fence. It needs to be fenced in because you don't want kids going into that once cornfield area where you have solar panels and touching stuff because they'll be electrocuted. Or worse, Yet these are the articles that are coming out. And then there's another article, and it's in Lifehacker, and it's how to get your solar panels ready for winter. And it shows a house with solar panels on the roof, and the solar panels are covered with ice and snow. And so, as you might imagine, in New York State, you have a lot of ice and you have a lot of snow. So you can cover the whole darn state with solar panels, but if you have a really big snowstorm or ice storm, those solar panels are not going to be working very well, if at all. And yet, these idiots in New York State have passed and intend to pass very shortly the All-Electric Building Act, which requires you to buy only electricity from solar farms and from wind farms, which destroy the countryside, destroy wildlife, destroy the beauty of the countryside, just because these climate change nuts have hijacked the state legislature, and they've hijacked New York City. Remember, these are the same people in New York City who have canceled Thomas Jefferson and removed his statue. So good luck getting enough electricity in New York City when this bill finally is implemented, and you're unlucky enough to be in a brand new building in New York City, which has got to be electrified only by solar panels, and then you have a major snowstorm in New York State, and you're like, well, where am I going to get the electricity? Well, sorry, sir, we have an outage because of snow. I'm sorry about that, man. Sorry that happened. And that's the dumbest bill in America, the All-Electric Building Act. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.